Join palms and repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. The palms down. All right, good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all. Thank you for showing up. Anyone here for the first time? A couple of you. What brings you here?
Curiosity of wanting to learn more about it.
Yeah. And when you say about it,
Buddhism in general, yeah.
and so I guess coming to an intro to Buddhism class gave you the idea you would learn more.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Well, welcome. Glad you're here. Yeah. Another hand. Somebody. Oh yeah.
My brother brought me.
Yeah. What was were you forced or did you choose to go?
No, I wasn't forced. It was just something that he's been really experiencing lately, so I wanted to share that with him.
Nice. Cool. We're glad you're here. Thank you. It's actually funny because often people will ask when a kind of a common question people will say is like, how do I get so and so into this practice? And usually it's, a loved one, family member, whatever that person is. And it's really just a reflection of very often if that person sees someone they know and love who's struggling with something, they want them to kind of do some meditation and Buddhist stuff to help them with their struggles. And so very often people say, well, how do I get so-and-so into this? And my answer always is you don't, right? I mean, if somebody comes to you and says you really need to go to this, what are they kind of telling you? They're just, what's that?
You're messed up.
Thank you for the honesty. I appreciate it. You can always count on you. Yeah, but that's the idea is that when we say to somebody, you should really go to this, you should really do meditation, you should really do, whatever, we're often saying to them, like, you got stuff going on. And that may be the case. And very often, we have a huge recovery community here, people, with addiction. And so very often seeing loved ones struggle with that is often sometimes what triggers, those kind of questions about how do I get so-and-so into this. And so it's always a gentle approach because when you start telling people you need to do this, that just never goes so well, especially if they've never gone to meditation or Buddhist stuff. I mean, just ask yourself for a moment, at some point in your life, at some point in time, if somebody came to you and said, you really need to go to meditation and check out this Buddhist thing, most likely there would have been a time in your life where you were like, no, not for me. And yet here you are. So keep that in mind when you try to get others into it. And really what triggered this is one of the best ways I've always shared for people to get others into this is to just practice yourself. Not making it about them, not making it about your struggling, your suffering, you need this, you. Because when people tell us that, we often just shut down. Again, I can't speak for everybody, but if somebody was telling me you need to go do that, it usually doesn't work that way. One of the best ways is you just practice. By practice, I mean, bring meditation into your life. Bring the practice of loving kindness and compassion into your life. Bring the practice of forgiveness into your life. And the more you do these things in your life, people will see that. They'll notice that. They'll reflect on that. That will speak to them. And very often they might say, like, what's wrong with you? You're being really kind these days. You all right? What's happening? And then you kind of share, like, this is what I'm doing in my life. And if they're interested, you can say, hey, well, this is what and it's not about coming here. It doesn't matter where. But if they're interested and they inquire, then you can share your practice with them and then see, how that goes. But for all of you who think there's someone in your life right now that really needs this, how has it gone so far telling them they need to do it? Yeah, you've had success with it? One. I said every head this way and you said this.
Yeah, he comes every Thursday.
Nice. So it is possible.
It is.
Yes, it is possible. But often very difficult to get others into this practice. So we practice for ourselves. And I always say, you know, for me, I would never, as long as I'm alive, I'd be doing this practice. I wouldn't stop. For me, this is not about like achieving some level of anything. It's just recognizing every single day my own level of greed, my own level of anger, my own level of ignorance, and trying to address that with a little more generosity, a little more compassion, a little more wisdom every single day. And can I suffer a little bit less today than I did yesterday? This is not about getting to some level with this stuff. This is not about like you've attained anything. There really is nothing to attain. Every day my life is going to be filled with absolute chaos and madness. Every single day. Every single day I'll have to live with the craziness that's in my head. Every single day. So we practice. I practice to continue to live with that. So it's just a reminder that we're doing this for us initially, and then we begin to see kind of the ripple effect that has with those around us. So, all right, so we'll start with meditation practice. To those joining virtually, welcome, glad you're here. Thank you for showing up. Dharma Bum Billy, glad you're joining us live from Scripps Hospital. Hope you're feeling better today than you were yesterday. See a little bit less suffering today than yesterday. I hope. A couple things to tell you for those who are maybe sitting for the first time. Nothing's going to happen to you. All right, you're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is this working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds on the inside of the room, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. And this practice of learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, if you are on a cushion, often helps sliding to the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. If you're on a bench or chair, however you are seated, just trying to find a position that's comfortable. If you need to move, simply move. It doesn't make you a bad meditator, just means you need to move. And for those who are new, you're not going to shut your mind off. It will not go blank. You will not think nothing. Your mind will race. I'll say things periodically to wake you up or remind you that you're lost in thought. Some of you might be asleep already. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with the eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. We'll start with gently guiding the attention Focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. And as the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Return attention, focus to the breath. Where is your mind? Lost in thought. Return to breath. Breathing in. Follow breath in. Breathing out. Follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments from your practice. Just sitting. Breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds, and the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do, nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important, the practice of meditation, is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you'd prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, it's nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how we sit and hold the hands or cross the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external situation. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddhist awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakened. He was a human being, no different than any one of us, who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. What that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless of where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. That's what we get. This practice is simply learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to every other 20-minute period of your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful, whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. It's not an easy practice, not necessarily fun. It's not an escape, as often people think it is. It's direct perception into the present moment. And the present moment for many people is terrifying. The present moment is filled with conflict, chaos, difficulty, challenges, fears, worries, anxieties. That's the present moment for so many people. And so often we turn to things, people, places to escape from the present moment because we're just not okay being with life as it is or being with the current situation. So we turn to something. And this practice is not that. This practice is sitting with it, recognizing all the chaos and conflict and fears and anxieties and worries and pressures and stresses. Understanding the impermanent nature, as the Buddha taught, of all of them, and realizing that they too shall pass. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's just sitting, breathing, becoming aware of what you think, what you say, and what you do in every moment. That's it. It never changes. For me, it's no more complicated than that. The recognition of your intention behind your thoughts, behind your words, and behind your actions. That's what we have every single day. That has nothing to do with Buddhism, nothing to do with spirituality, nothing to do with religion. It's just your life. Your life is you doing things. And this practice is understanding why you do things, why you say things, why you think things. And so very often when we want to learn about Buddhism, we think there's so much outside of us that we have to learn. And for me, the beauty of this practice is it's not about learning about anything outside of you. It's about learning about you. It is holding up a mirror and reflecting back on yourself. Which is always fun because the Buddha says there is no self. So I hope that's going well for y'all. So with that, I'll pause. For me, always, really, I just prefer to respond to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice. For those who are joining virtually, again, welcome. Thanks for being here. Feel free to say hello as you are. If you have any questions, you can put them on the chat box there. I'll do my best to respond. And we'll use the rest of our brief time for questions.
Buddhist thought is that all things happen because of cause and condition. Does that apply to the mental thoughts also? Our mental thoughts at times are just random firing of synapses, mental thoughts can be.
Yeah. So the question was, Buddhist teachings is that all things happen from causes and conditions. And so your question is, does the same apply for thoughts? Or could they be just random synapses firing? So a couple things to back up before I get to that question directly, but just to put it into context, it brings up really what I think is a very kind of Western way of dealing. Again, this isn't addressing your question, but I want to start here. It brings up a very Western way of kind of dealing with life, where often we get conditioned to say, I shouldn't just say Western, I'm sure lots of people all over the world do this, but especially in our world here, people often say things happen for a reason. That sure is a great way of justifying everything in your life, right? Buddhist teachings are not saying things happen for a reason. This is the start of your question, really. Buddhist teachings are saying things just happen. Now, I understand from a kind of philosophical, psychological way of getting through difficult experiences in our lives, we will come up with a reason for why things have happened. And say, well, this terrible thing happened, but it happened for a reason. That's not the reason it happened. Terrible things happen, as do wonderful, beautiful, good things happen. We then assign meaning to it afterwards. And very often when terrible things happen or bad things happen, to deal with it and to be okay and to continue on, we give it some positive spin. And we say, this is why the terrible thing happened because it led me here. That's not why the terrible thing happened. Whatever reason you give the terrible thing happening had to do with nothing prior. Well, ultimately it had to do with everything prior, but not to the thing itself. It had to do with the meaning you give it. So it's really important to start with that. Things just happen. It sucks that terrible things happen, but they happen. It's wonderful that beautiful things happen, but they happen. Whatever meaning we assign to them, that is up to us. And I am a big fan of, from a psychological standpoint, looking at the terrible things that have happened and trying to turn them into positive life lessons. So I just want to say that. I'm not ignoring that because that's what so many people do. We look at things that have gone on in our lives that have not been okay, and we give a reason to it, and that makes it a little bit easier for us to cope with it. Instead of saying like, well, that happened, that sucked. Why? No reason, it just sucks. That's not fun, right? So we often will give reasons for things, right? But to your question, so yes, Buddha taught causes and conditions, right? Create everything, including thought. Now, I'm not smart enough to know how the synapses work, right? There's a few people in the room who probably can tell you this. But what I can tell you is Nagarjuna, the 4th century Buddhist philosopher, they consider really one of the wisest next to the Buddha, kind of in the chain of Buddhist teachings for 2,500 years. He said that his text, The Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, that you cannot have something come from nothing. Everything comes from something. So even if these random, what you would call kind of random synapses are firing these random thoughts that seem to be coming out of nowhere, they couldn't come out of nowhere. They had to come from one place and one place only, which is what? Your mind. Conditioned, whether we recognize it or not, no matter how random they are or not, only conditioned by your prior experiences. We cannot have something that comes from nothing, according to technical Buddhist teachings. So it might not make much sense. We might be driving along and have the most bizarre thoughts that have nothing to do with necessarily anything that we experienced before. But the thoughts are still being created. They're not being created from anything outside of us, right? Which can be really liberating or really scary. It just depends on the thought.
I'm finding it scary because if they are random, then it's easy to ignore them.
Of course it's easier to ignore them, because then if they're, as you said, if they're random, it's easier to ignore them, because then we can just say, well, these aren't my thoughts. Whose are they, normal? You know? I didn't mess up that head of yours. You did that all on your own. Just like you didn't mess up this head of mine. I did that all on my own. Now, ultimately, technical Buddhist teachings, it's not just this one life. It's all past experiences, endless continuation of consciousness called Laya Vijnana, storehouse consciousness. It gets into the cycle of rebirth, continuation of consciousness, and that consciousness has been around for endless time. Now, I might think, well, I'm Jeff and I'm 50 and these are my experiences, so everything comes from this life's experiences. No, that's not ultimately the teaching. And if you're not a fan of rebirth, reincarnation, it doesn't matter. You don't have to be to embody Buddhist teaching, to embrace Buddhist teachings. Just think of rebirth or reincarnation, or whatever you want to call it, as like going from yesterday to today. Everything you did yesterday will influence everything you do today. Everything you do today will influence everything you do tomorrow. From body, speech, and mind, thoughts, words, and actions, which is what the Buddha called karma. Karma is not goes around, comes around. Karma is action. Karma is not what we get. Karma is what we give. And what we give is thoughts, words, and actions. This is our karma. So your karmic thoughts, sorry, dude.
Okay.
But again, I was going to mess with you and say you got no one to blame but yourself. But again, the beauty is there is no self, so you can't even blame yourself, right?
No, I was just trying to see how to ignore the thoughts.
I know. You can't ignore them. Yeah. But on that note, I think it's important to not necessarily ignore them, but also not give them so much power and strength and
That's what I'm
weight.
saying, yeah.
Yeah, because we get these thoughts. I mean, you know, I'm not kidding, man. If you knew the thoughts that randomly flashed through my head, you know, it'd be ridiculous. If you all knew what I thought, none of you would be listening to me right now. And I'm not saying that like humbly or modestly, you know, like that's the absolute truth. Whether you want to buy that or not, or believe that or not, that's your mess, not mine. But that's the absolute truth, you know? So the problem for me as a practice has not been the thoughts. Thoughts become what? Actions. So for me as a practice, you know, I gave up a long time ago thinking that any time in this life that I'm going to be able to like have this perfectly, you know, little whatever mind. Not happening. The challenge for me, the practice for me is when the mind fires off those thoughts, whatever they are, no matter how, you know, whatever range they're at on the spectrum, can I not act on them? Can I not speak to them? Can I observe them as just thoughts passing by like clouds or airplanes, whatever metaphor you want to use, and just let them pass? Most of the time we get a thought and we stick with it for 3 hours or 30 years, and it'll torture us. And this idea of that thought just coming and going, arising and falling seems absolutely impossible. So you continue to make yourself miserable because you just stick on these thoughts. And then you begin to believe them. And then you try to get others to believe them. So, thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. What else? Yeah, I just see a hand. Yeah.
I found that someday I developed by managing moment to moment, never mind the whole day, that's like way too long. I'm like questioning, when you start learning Buddhism, like especially I was reading about reincarnation and all that, that's just like a little, feel a little intense. How do I keep it light so it doesn't go too serious and heavy, but it kind of, it's serious, but also to not let it like bog me down. So how do I find kind of a balance?
When you say the part about not bogging you down, are you talking about like teachings such as reincarnation or things like that?
Yeah. Maybe I was reading some, you can review ruin as a hell being, and I mean, it just felt like I was like,
Oh, yeah. So what you're saying is you're actually reading things that you don't like, and therefore you don't want to embrace that.
well, it's different than my upbringing, let's put it this way, so it just,
I understand.
yeah.
So what you're saying is you're okay with a lot of the teachings that align with what you think, but you're
Yes.
not okay with the teachings that don't align with what you
I'm
think.
opening my mind a little bit, but it's like, how do I not get too, not depressed, but also, so how do I keep it kind of,
I understand,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to get deeper with your question here
yes,
because
thank you.
instead of me just giving you some little thing that says ignore the teachings you don't like, which is always an option, the question is to ask yourself, why are there these things that I don't like? That's the question to ask yourself. Because yes, I mean, Buddhism for 2,500 years has been taught religiously, no different than any other religion. And yes, there are hell realms and heaven realms and rebirth realms and all that kinds of stuff. And that might not sit well with you, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
Right.
So for me, two things. Start is to ask yourself, why does this not resonate with me so well? And the second thing is, from a practical standpoint, yes, the Buddha said, put these teachings into practice, and if they work for you, great. If not, abandon them. But that gets kind of dangerous very often because we have a great way of justifying, like, you know, I mean, the Buddha said, practice loving kindness, for example. And we might say, well, I don't like loving kindness, so I'm going to abandon that, right? Or I'm going to pick and choose when I want to practice loving kindness. That's not, to me, what the Buddha meant when he said, try this stuff, right? He's not saying try it, judge it, critique it, analyze it, and see what fits with your ego or not, right? But ultimately, to your question, I think it helps to take those things that maybe don't resonate with you or just seem so foreign to you and understand that they're there. I think when it comes to rebirth teachings, I do just look at it from a moment-to-moment, a day-to-day perspective. You know, everything you're learning about Buddhism doesn't require you to, like, there's no test at the end where, like, you're going to go to some gates and they're like, do you or do you not believe in rebirth? It doesn't work that way. You know, it's not like Willy Wonka, good egg, bad egg, you know? For those of you who remember Willy Wonka. Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, just making sure. What's your name? Violet, right? Violet.
Violet Beauregard.
Say again?
Violet Beauregard.
You even got the last name. Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, just think of it as a moment-to-moment, day-to-day thing. And, you know, it's fun to learn about, but don't get too wrapped up in it.
Yeah.
There's a question here. It says, at the start, I say, I take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. What are your thoughts about the words I take refuge in? So thanks, Cinda. Always good to have you here. Yeah, so I often, when I talk about the Triple Gem, I actually will introduce it initially and ask people, what do you think it means to take refuge in? And so, you know, for everybody in this room, when you hear the word refuge, what does that mean? Just shout out some words when you hear refuge. I take refuge. What does refuge mean? What else? Comfort, safety, peace, shelter. Anything else? Protection, I think somebody said. Rest. So I think first and foremost, yeah, so it said safety. I think it's important, not so much what do I mean when I say I take refuge in. I think it's important to see how you resonate with the word I take refuge in. Yeah, safety, as you said, comfort, peace, protection, home, whatever words it means to you, because that's what we're finding in those, what's called the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. And to walk through it real quickly, when we take refuge in these things, often people think like when I take refuge in the Buddha, that means you're like surrendering or bowing down to or giving your life to the Buddha. The Buddha died 2,500 years ago. He can't help you. You're on your own. So if you're thinking the Buddha is going to come in and like save you and solve all your problems, no. What we learned from Nirmal is the Buddha didn't create your problems and he's not going to solve your problems. So stop blaming the Buddha, right? We create our problems, which is really beautiful because then we can solve our problems. So when we take refuge in the Buddha, we're taking refuge in what's called bodhicitta or Buddha nature. And the Buddha said very clearly, we are all already enlightened. We all have this awakened being within us. It's just covered with greed, anger, ignorance, delusion, pride, ego, cravings, desires, all these things that cause our suffering. That's what's blocking this awakening from occurring. For me, a great example is on a cloudy day, you got the clouds. Do you see the sun on a cloudy day? No. The sun is still there. It didn't disappear just because the clouds are there. You just can't see it. So the practice of taking refuge is to understand that we are that sun. We are that Buddha nature, which is why we should treat people with kindness and compassion, because everybody has Buddha nature. Everybody has the ability to awaken. Everybody has that sun. So the second one is the Dharma, and this is taking refuge in the teachings, comfort, safety, protection. Kind of what I alluded to before, you know, for me, the Dharma being the teachings, right? I mean, generosity, morality, patience, diligence, concentration, wisdom, loving kindness, compassion, joy, equanimity, you know, all these basic words, which most of us are familiar with. I find those to be really helpful. And when I practice them in my life, I find that I suffer less and those around me suffer less. So that's also, for me, a pretty easy one to find comfort in those teachings. And then the last one is the Sangha, and that's the community. You know, time of the Buddha, it was, you know, the monks and then the nuns. And, you know, fast forward to today, it's a group of people sitting together and doing meditation, looking at Buddhist teachings. This is your community. This is your Sangha. And, you know, yes, Sanghas are safe places, but you also got to work really hard. I've talked about this a lot. I'm not going to get too much into this now, but you also got to work really hard to keep a safe place. You know, don't be fooled by people that show up to Buddhist places thinking that just because they come here, that means they're peaceful and happy and wonderful people. They have potential to be peaceful and happy and wonderful people, but they can also be really screwed up and do a lot of harmful things. Right? I mean, do you think that the person next to you is like this perfect enlightened angel just because they're acting well? Good answer. Sitting next to your wife on a Saturday morning, right? I was looking at them. Yeah, we got a couple of them. Good answer as well. But so the idea is that we're all suffering. We're all struggling. We all have the ability to do really painful, harmful things. Don't make the mistake thinking that just because you're on a Saturday that everybody is like this, you enlightened being. We're here because we're not. I hate to shatter any of the enlightened ones in the room. So we have to keep it a safe space, and keeping safe space is not easy at any time, not just today. Wasn't easy 1,000 years ago, wasn't easy 2,000 years ago, wasn't easy 3,000 years ago. It's not going to be easy 1,000 years from now. Keeping spaces safe is really difficult. And also, I think the other important piece of Sangha and community is really to challenge each other, to push each other, to motivate each other, to inspire each other, to hold each other accountable. I mean, one of the best things that I ever learned in this practice was probably 15 years ago, no longer than that, probably 17 years ago. Early Dharma Bum days, and I was having an argument with a friend of mine, and in the process of really building all of this, and this person, we were kind of debating, arguing about something Buddhist related and community related, and I said to this person, that's just how I am, and they said, well, then maybe you should change how you are. And that was one of the most brilliant things anybody had ever said to me, because it forced me to look at myself and say, what do I need to change about me? So, yeah. What else? Questions? And then Cindy added refuge in love, compassion, kindness, forgiveness, etc. Yeah. That's why I think it's important for each of us to find what does refuge mean to us. And not just finding, I also look at Sangha as not just at like your little Buddhist place that you come together, everywhere you go. If you viewed traffic on the 805 freeway at 5 o'clock as your Sangha, you would treat people there much better, So, but we don't. But those are the same people that are here. The person that cut you off, that you screamed at and yelled at, they're sitting right next to you right now. What else? Questions?
Yeah, so as I start to incorporate this more and meditate more, like following the precepts and the Eightfold Path, and I think I'm becoming more aware of those times that I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So following the teachings of like expecting, or not expecting, but being able to become enlightened, as you were saying, and then so I guess there's like a contradiction between accepting that you're not going to be always able to follow those things, but also like aiming towards what Buddha is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I guess it's hard to.
There is.
Yeah.
Yes. No, great question. I think it's important to understand around, and I think virtually most of you heard that, but I think it's important to understand two things. That early on, to the first part of your kind of comment question, early on, it's like when we start reading about precepts and, to refrain from lying and killing and stealing and sexual misconduct and intoxicants, and we start learning about the way that we harm ourselves and others, and we start reading over and over and over again about practicing loving kindness and compassion in everything in our lives, whoa, that'll mess you up. Because for many of us, we haven't been living that way. And these are not, I'll say this first too, my caution always for everybody when you begin to learn this stuff is not to then judge yourself. Because that can happen. We start exploring how we've been throughout our lives, and then we read Buddhist stuff, and we're like, man, I'm no hope for me, right? So try to be sure to not judge yourself, critique yourself, or even label yourself or give yourself like kind of this grade or level, first and foremost. Second, I think it is important to understand that we are aspiring. And I look at, I know I mentioned it earlier, but instead of saying I'm inspiring to be enlightened or awakened, I'm just aspiring to suffer less today than I did yesterday. So I never suggest anybody we're so goal oriented, especially as a culture, everything is like, kindergarten. Nobody like in second grade came up to you and said, just stay in second grade forever, right? Everything was about the next level. And Buddhist practice, I think if we bring that to it, it can get a little bit, dangerous is the wrong word, but then we're setting ourselves up for failure, right? So I think it's important to continue to strive to cultivate those things in your life, but not working towards awakening or enlightenment as a goal. Because then you're going to start asking yourself, like, am I there yet? And if you were fully awakened, from what I read, you wouldn't ask that question. Because there would be no self to awaken. there would be no goal to attain. The Heart Sutra we do on Sundays, my favorite, I mean, probably every line of it is my favorite, but I think my favorite piece in there truly is, it talks about bodhisattvas, enlightened beings, relying on prajna paramita, which is perfect wisdom, attain anuttara samyak sambodhi, supreme ultimate enlightenment, because they have nothing to attain. When they have nothing to attain, they attain awakening. So that right there tells you that this goal we're setting towards it actually gives rise to duality, which says, I am this and I need to become that. So baby steps for one, give yourself like 10 years, and then ask that question to yourself again. Because the reality is, if we practice loving kindness and compassion and forgiveness every day of our lives for the next 10 years, how do you think you'll be 10 years from now compared to how you are now? Kinder.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's all that matters. Goals can be dangerous, I find. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah. What else? There's a question here. And hi Benton, glad you're here. From time to time, I struggle with saying no to family and friends. How do you approach that? You care about them and their struggles, yet not feel guilty about not getting involved or giving in. My guess is probably everybody or almost everyone in the room can relate to things like that. This idea of wanting to have compassion and love and kindness for others, but also realizing that it can drain you completely. And I think that, just kind of the default example of an oxygen mask on an airplane, you got to put it on yourself first, take care of yourself. And I think that if we begin to understand wisdom and compassion, which is the two wings of Buddhist teaching, wisdom and compassion, if we can apply wisdom and compassion to ourselves first and recognize, how much can I handle? How much of other, family and friends stuff can I take on? What is wise for me to carry? And in that process, we're having compassion for ourselves that says, I love myself, so I'm not going to bury myself in everybody else's stuff. So I think it's really just a matter of being, we talk about Buddhist teachings around the precepts of, right speech, or the Eightfold Path of right speech, and honesty. I think you have to be honest with yourself. And this idea of not, to refrain from lying is requiring us to be honest with ourselves. It says, I have to take care of myself. And it's okay for me to say no. My oldest, bestest friend in the world always taught me, do not do things out of obligation. She always said that. And I've carried that to me as one of the greatest Buddhist teachings ever, that we often feel obligated to do things because they're family or close friends. And often in that obligation, we destroy ourselves. So I don't think that there's anything, selfish about making sure that you take care of yourself. I think that's actually, I'm repeating this, but I think that's actually incredibly wise and compassionate. And if they have problems with that, that's on them. It's not your responsibility to make sure everybody's okay with you. I'll say that again. It's not your responsibility to make sure everybody is okay with you. If they're not okay with you because you have to do what's taking care of you, that's their mess, not yours. So I hope that helps. What else? Yeah.
Just going on that, like, how do you put that into context with somebody that might have a mental illness or a strong addiction? Like, that they need more guidance or help or whatnot, but like can't physically do that for them.
Yeah.
And so therefore, like, you're stuck in this place where you do have to worry about getting taken down with them, so to speak, as well as like caring for this person that you once were close with but has now
Yeah.
problems.
There is no answer to that question. I mean, you in essence asked and answered
Yeah.
the question. To me, the question around, if those who didn't hear virtually, the question is, how do you, when it's loved one, I'll paraphrase, but when it's loved ones that, dealing with addiction and they're going down, how do you protect yourself from not going down with them? You want to love them and care about them, but at the same time, you got to care for yourself and protect yourself. There is no like, here, turn to page 18 and there's your answer. I wish there was. The challenge is, I think, just this, what you're doing. It just seemed that way from the way you asked it, like absolute recognition that you must be mindful of yourself and take care of yourself. And it sucks to see loved ones crashing and burning. Many, if not all of us in this room have gone through that. And especially with things like addiction, even aside from addiction, I mean, we've all had times in our lives where we needed help. And again, in your question, you said you can't physically do it for them. We are on our own. People could have hit me over the head a million times and told me to do something, but I had to do it, as do they. And so there is kind of that fine line we walk that says, I'm trying, I'm here, I'm pushing, I'm motivated, I'm inspiring, I love you, I care about you, I'm going to do my best. But if they don't do it, what can you do? You just love as much as you can and try to protect yourself as much as you can. But yeah,
I know.
I wish I had the.
No, it's the battle, it's constant. And
Yeah.
It's an everyday kind of thing, especially when they pop back in and you're just like, oh God, I don't know how to manage this.
Yeah. And I think that what you just said, I think that's possibly, again, I don't like to get to too many specifics, but that's your answer. I can't manage this anymore. I got to take care of myself. Your life, your mess. And I don't mean that in a harsh way. Like, to me, there's that love that says, your life, your mess. I have to take care of my life and my mess, because we all got a mess. We don't need others. It's a balance. It's hard. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, part of right speech and good communication is compassionate listening.
Yeah.
And compassionate listening and loving kindness don't require you to do anything more than just that. You're not obligated to do anything more than listen compassionately with your full attention and have feelings of loving kindness. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Say again?
Meredith, page 18.
Oh, Meredith, page 18. Yes. She's got a book coming out soon. Don't worry. So, all right, I'm gonna close on that. Yeah, lots of questions virtually. Sorry, I can't get to all of them. We'll join palms. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May this merit be transferred to Pam during her time of suffering, and to Mark and his family and friends, and to Billy during his time of healing. May he be free from pain and suffering. May we all be free from pain and suffering. All right, thank you all for being here. A couple quick announcements before you all head out. My name is Jeff. I'm a Dharma Bum. We opened up this temple 18 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those of us who lead, we're not monks, we're not nuns, we're not gurus, we're not masters, we're not teachers, we're not looking for students. We're just practitioners. We do our best to take our understanding of Buddhist teachings and put it into terms that hopefully make sense to those who show up. Every night, different practices going on, different people leading from a different Buddhist tradition. Every Thursday, 4:30, we do I think one of the best things around here. It's a food redistribution program. We prepare gourmet vegetarian meals, also known as peanut butter and jelly, and we feed people who sleep on the street. So anytime you kind of lack gratitude and you think your life sucks, feed people sleeping on the sidewalk, and it tends to help. Otherwise, first Saturday of the month, we have a half day of silence. And also, for about 9 years, we had a singing bowl meditation once a month. And I'm not suggesting that we're necessarily going back to bringing it once a month, but we are doing a crystal bowl meditation today at 2 o'clock. So if you want to, come back at 2 or not, that's up to you. But if you didn't see the announcement, we're having a crystal bowl meditation today from 2 to 3. So you're all welcome. It's as free as everything else we do around here. So thank you for being here. Buddha for you's downstairs if you need anything. Wish you well. Thanks all.